welcome to today's episode of Royal Journeys, where we chat to some of the great players and people who are or have been a member of the Essendon Royals about their journey in football. In our second episode, we chat to former Essendon Royals junior and senior player George Apostolidis. Since leaving the Royals, George has gone on to carve out a full-time career in football, working in the A-League with Melbourne Victory, Brisbane Raw and now Melbourne City, as well as having enjoyed a short stint overseas in Saudi Arabia. So welcome, George.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
So before we go back into, I guess, your Royals days, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Melbourne City?
Yeah, so my current role is performance analyst at Melbourne City, so working closely with the A-League team, the A-League coaches in, I guess, putting together and analysing both our team in the way that we train and play, but also opposition teams and the way that they play, and then how we can kind of break them down, and then also giving players that visual feedback, in terms of, video presentations and animations and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So how did you get into that field of work?
Yeah. So post school, I went to uni and did a bachelor degree in sports science, and then followed that up with a master's degree. During my time, we had placement opportunities, and that's how I got into Melbourne Victory. So working both in the sports science setting, and then also a bit of video analysis work whilst I was there, introduced to that. And then from that, made some really good connections and, was offered, my first full-time job in Brisbane. And then shortly after, I moved back down to Melbourne in the same position I'm in now.
Yeah. So, I mean, was it always a goal of yours, even as a kid, to make a career in football or work full time in a professional environment?
Yes and no. I mean, I always enjoyed sport, so that was what pushed me to that sports science degree. Even coming up to year 12 and after, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Like I said, I always loved sport and knew that working in a sporting team might be something that I would have enjoyed. And it wasn't up until my second or third year of uni where I started doing placements and started getting hands-on within sporting teams and sporting environments that I guess maybe enjoyed and saw what full-time positions were actually out there, because coming out of school and into uni, I didn't even know that there was such thing as a full-time performance analyst for a sporting club. So the placements really opened my eyes, and I've been lucky enough to be working in the league for a few years now, so I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, obviously you said you had a big passion for sport, and you knew that you always enjoyed sport, so to maybe work in sport would be great. But obviously football is probably the sport of choice for you, and that's the sport that you played as well. So how do you think that that affinity for football sort of started?
Yeah, I mean, coming from European background, Greek background, you're always kind of brought into it. You don't really have much of a choice, but in school I was always playing. You always had a ball at my feet, and was lucky enough to play for a few clubs when I was in my juniors, and obviously Essendon Raws was one of them, and it just kind of grew from there, and always loved it. Always watched Premier League highlights and followed a bunch of leagues around the world. And then in 05 when the A-League started, that was kind of like a rejuvenation of it after the NSL. So just helped having a team that was close to home. In Melbourne were Melbourne Victory were quite successful back in the early part of the A-League, which was the team I was following. Obviously now I'm at City, but that's how it kind of started.
So where did your sort of junior career start? What was your first club?
Sydenham Park. I grew up out west, so Sydenham Park was a short drive away from home, and played there for a couple seasons when I was, I think I started when I was 8.
Yeah.
So I played there for a couple years, and then had a break of, I think, maybe 2 years where I wasn't playing, and picked it up again when I was 13 or so back at Royals, and the rest of my junior and senior days were at Essendon. So,
I mean, what brought you to the club after that break? What made you sort of want to get back into the sport at a club level, and why was Royals the club for you at that time?
Yeah, I'm not sure why I stopped playing, to be honest, because I always loved I always loved playing. So I'm not sure if it was my choice or mum and dad's choice at that time, but yeah, after that period, I think I had a family friend or a few friends who actually played at the club,
Yeah.
who, said come along to a session one day, the start of pre-season, and obviously I wanted to get back into it. So I think that was that Cross Keys, that first session back, and was part of that team, and then every year just stayed there.
Yeah, and obviously, you did work your way through the junior ranks and into the sort of senior squad. So, I mean, what did you really enjoy about your time at the club over those years?
Oh, there was a heap of things, Matty. Like as well, it was a really good culture, and all the boys were pretty close back then. And each year as you got older, you kind of grew with that same team a lot of the time. A lot of the people who you played with under 14s went up to under 16s with you, and they went up to under 18s, and it just kind of grew, and you came good mates as well. And like I said, the culture was really good, and the people that worked at the club and ran the club were really friendly. And we had a number of good coaches, your dad being one of them at one point. But yeah, it was just really good to, I guess, have a few good, really close mates that, you knew that day one of pre-season that you were going to be there with them.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously, you mentioned a few, that you were lucky to have some good coaches at the club. And any that stood out? Don't say my old man, but anyone else that stood out?
Well, he got the first shout out, so he's got to be up there. There was heaps from the top of my head. I mean, Brian was a great coach in the reserves as well. Siege, who's I know still doing some stuff around the club. I think one of my first coaches was Dom, a guy named Dom, who, I mean, there's heaps off the top of my head, but those ones were some of the ones that I guess clicked with pretty well.
So I guess, at some point you maybe realised that there wasn't really a professional career in football as a player. So how did you go about looking into or discovering the sort of roles that might exist, in professional sport, not necessarily just football, beyond playing?
Yeah, I guess that's where uni was a big help for me, because my course was quite broad in that it could have veered off into so many different avenues. So it kind of introduced us to the sports psychology side, the exercise physiology side, physiotherapy, sports science, what I'm doing at the moment, analysis, which back then when I did the course wasn't really part of the course, but I know there are subjects and units which are included in that now, so it is a growing field. But I guess uni was a bit of an eye opener, and going back to my internship days, I guess once you start working in a football department, you see all the different, I guess, expertise and skills that make up a club that a lot of people don't really know of until you actually work in that industry. So that was, I guess, a really big eye opener. And like I said before, once I understood and knew that there was full-time positions, and I thought I might have been able to have a good chance at making a career out of it, I kind of went with it and focused on that.
Yeah. So obviously now you're very much focused on the analysis side of the game, but I think, as you mentioned before, you really started off in a sports science sort of, degree and background. So what was it, I guess, initially about sports science that attracted you to that side of things? And when do you think that analysis side sort of became a bit more pronounced, or something you were, I don't know, maybe more interested in?
Yeah. So I guess I was always really good with like maths and numbers, and being in that sports science role, looking after GPS and seeing how many meters this person runs and the top speed in terms of numbers, and I guess that was always something that interested me. And I mean that kind of sports science role was a little bit of a background role in a way, in terms of you've got your coaches and they're on the field, and that's where the main message comes from and is driven from the to the players from the coaching staff. But the sports science was almost like a a mini background kind of role. That was where I guess saw myself potentially fitting in. I got introduced to the analysis side whilst I was at Melbourne Victory as well. again, during that internship, started doing some stuff with the youth team and seeing, I guess, more the football side and the tactical side, seeing it from more of a coach's point of view rather than, I guess, a sports scientist, even though they do work hand in hand. The analysis role does, I guess, err more on the coaching side, in that you do need to see patterns. You do need to, be able to tactically analyze a game and see things that, you can relate back to the coach. And I guess, once I started doing that side of it, I really enjoyed it. And again, working with numbers in terms of statistics and those kind of things, to be able to, I guess, quantify the way that our teams perform and that opposition teams perform. I guess that's what really drove me to continue in what I'm doing now, and still enjoying it.
Yeah. So I guess we might touch on what you're doing at City now, like a bit later. But so after the Victory internship, I think you worked in some NPL setups. So what were you doing in that sort of area? Was that a really good, I guess, space for you to, I guess, build on the initial things that you'd worked on at uni and with Victory?
Yeah, definitely. I think after the internship, I did some work with the national teams. So working with the Joeys and the Olyroos and the Young Socceroos, in both, I guess, sports science and analysis roles. And then, NPL experience was really good as well, because it's a different setting. It was another experience and a chance for me to learn in, like I said, a different setting with, players that were, I guess, not full-time professionals, but were semi-professional. And it helped me to, I guess, adjust some of my methods and adjust to that environment, because as much as I wanted to implement everything that I would have liked to, and that stuff that I've seen, at an elite setting, it wasn't always possible at NPL level, due to the fact that, the players aren't full-time, and you can't expect them to, I guess, have the same workload, in that setting, when they're still working and that kind of stuff. So there was a few things that I had to juggle and adjust from my point of view. But like I said, it was a really good experience, and it was a chance for me to learn, and, some things I've taken, from those roles into what I'm doing now. So it's invaluable.
And I think, obviously the connections that you would have made in that time as well. Obviously, I know you did some work with Arthur Pappas, who's now the Newcastle Jets coach. But, he had a stint in Saudi Arabia, which, you obviously went along for as well. So tell us a little bit about that experience and, what was the club, what were you doing over there, and what was it like to, move overseas and work overseas, even if it was just short term, but through football?
Yeah, Arch was great to work with. That was the first time I had worked with him over there in Saudi. My role was a fitness coach over there, so looking after, again, the GPS monitoring and, from a load management point of view. It was a great experience. Obviously, a complete different world to what we know here, and the way that they operate's a little bit different to the way that we operate. So I had to adjust very quickly, because, the club was, 5 or 6 games out from the end of the season. They were in the relegation spot at that minute. So I kind of had to learn very quickly and adjust. The second I got off the plane, I was full steam ahead for 5.5, 6 weeks, whatever I was there. So again, great experience, working within a different culture and completely different set of players who, again, some players that I had worked with here weren't necessarily at the same level of what they are over there, both in terms of cultural professionalism. So that was an adjustment that I had to make straight away, and I'm thankful that I got that chance to work, and like you said, networking as well. So Arch is a coach that I work with, and I was really happy to have that experience with him, even if it was for a short period.
Yeah, and so after that experience, you obviously come back to Melbourne, or did you go straight to Brisbane? Did that opportunity come up straight away with the Raw?
No, I came back to Melbourne and was at Gully. So I spent a season with Green Gully, who Arthur
Yep.
was there again. So spent some time again there with him in NPL world, and learn a lot. I like to think that I look back at that time and I made some good friends and some good colleagues who were really professional and taught me a lot in my time there, and hopefully, I might have been able to teach them a few things as well. So yeah, that was a good experience.
Yeah, and then Brisbane Raw come knocking. So that's really your first full-time sort of role in an A-League environment, right? So
Yeah.
how did that sort of come up? What was that experience like?
Yeah, it came up pretty quickly and pretty out of the blue. So I worked with a coach who was working with the youth team in Melbourne Victory when I was there in my internship. So he had relocated and he was working at the Raw, and he had just taken over at that time. So he gave me a call and, asked me if I wanted to go up. And, I thought it was, a really good chance to get my foot in the door in a full-time role, which, are quite hard to get. So I thought, there was nothing holding me back and nothing tying me down in Melbourne, so bit the bullet, went up there and, really enjoyed it. Again, learned a lot, worked with, a few different coaches and made a few more connections and networks, and loved it. Loved being there, not Monday to Friday, more like Monday to Sunday, but really enjoyed the lifestyle and, just, I guess, the workflows, the 7-day workflow of working in a professional team was really good.
So what were the main things that you had to adapt to going from these sort of part-time environments into this full-time environment? Was it obviously easier working with full-time players? What did it change from coach to coach? What was sort of expected from you? What were the big sort of differences that came up with moving into that A-League environment?
Yeah, for me, I think I found it, I guess, the workload's a lot more, first and foremost, but I think for me, I found it easier in a way because I had more structure in the week, and I guess your workflows are kind of set. So, the first coach I was working with up there, had a workflow from match day to post match. First session, post match, we had our match review, and throughout the week I'd work on opposition and we would watch opposition footage in preparation for the next weekend. But I mean, that changes and that workflow can change depending on the coach and the way that they work compared to how they want you to work. So again, that was a really good opportunity for me to see how two different coaches work, because obviously Robbie Fowler came in the season after.
Yeah.
And he had a different way of working compared to coaches that I had been working with previously. So again, that was an adjustment that I had to make. And I guess there's no right or wrong way of working as a coach. I guess that's the beautiful thing about it. And for me, I can always learn and find different avenues and different ways to do my work and get the same outcome.
Yeah, and then eventually, obviously, you move back to the hometown of Melbourne, and obviously now you're working with Melbourne City. Obviously we learn a lot about player transfers and the way players move between A-League clubs. How does that play out in an A-League scenario? Is it like you get approached? Is it you go for a job like anyone else? How does that sort of work?
Yeah, so I got approached from someone who was working at the club who I'd worked with previously in Brisbane, actually. So they obviously knew of me and knew I was from Melbourne, and they kind of reached out and had a little think about it. Had to weigh up a few things, but the result was that I chose to come back and haven't looked back since.
Yeah, and obviously now you're working with Paddy Kisnorbo and I guess his whole backroom team. What's a typical week like for an analyst? You sort of just said you work pretty much Monday to Sunday. So I'm guessing, if the match is on Saturday, when does the pre-game work flow directly from the end of the previous game, or is there what's a typical week sort of look like? As much as
Yeah, I guess it just depends on the turnaround. So if we've got a 7-day turnaround, it gives us 6 days to go through our process of watching the game again after, if we have a Saturday game, it gives us time to watch the game, whether it's a Sunday or a Monday, and then start showing players review. Normally the first session back, we try and get some clips to the players, whether it's attacking or defensive stuff. It might be all in one, it might be split. It just depends on, again, what the coaches want to show and how much time we have in between games. And then as soon as we finish the review, we're on the opposition. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, even, we start looking at opposition, and normally we focus on their last 2 or 3 games, and then the last time we played them as well, to give us a good indication on how we think they're going to set up and how we think they're going to play, and how we can, I guess, adjust if we need to our formation and our patterns to kind of justify reasoning based on how they're going to set up tactically. So, we look at their last lineups and if they've made any changes, and, if so, why have they made those changes against certain teams? And yeah, really, I guess, hone in on the details about how they're going to play, and really try and, I guess, come up with a game plan and really focus on that as the week progresses. And then obviously as we get closer, it gets a lot finer. And the details become a lot finer, as we lead into the game. If we have a short turnaround, that process might be a lot sped up, as you can imagine. If we've got, say, a midweek game and we play on a Saturday and a Wednesday, for instance, we've only got 3 days in between. So, we might make a shorter review, or the preview for the opposition might be, split between 2 days, or I guess it just depends on the week and the workflow. But the longer the turnaround for me, the better, because it gives me more time to get things ready. The shorter turnarounds means I don't get much sleep.
So obviously, you sort of spoke about it at Raw. You worked with a couple of different coaches. Obviously now you're working with another coach at Melbourne City. So I'm guessing the answer to this question is that it changes from coach to coach. But how much of what you do is directed by the coaches? Do they sort of give you an idea of what they're looking for, or do they use you more as a resource and rely on you to come to them with, things to look out for from the opposition, or, that sort of stuff? Is it a bit of both?
It's definitely a bit of both. Obviously, I rely on them quite heavily on, the tactical element of it, because at the end of the day, they're the coach. So whatever they see and whatever they want tactically, is what I need to learn. So the way that they see the game is the same way that I see the game. So we see the same kind of patterns. But there's also the element of, it's my job to, if we're playing Sydney FC, for instance, I need to understand exactly the way that they play. And for the coach, a lot of the time it's very much on field, and they don't have 15 hours a week to watch every second of every game. So I guess it's up to me as well to find patterns and to find potentially little avenues where we can exploit the opposition. So if I see something that I think might benefit us, I feel comfortable enough to go to the coaches and say, hey, I think this is an area that, based on the way that we play, we can exploit the opposition. Here's a few, video examples of, player A and player B, doing, this action. And I think that, the way that we play, we can do this action to, get some joy. So it's definitely a bit of both, but also the fact that, coaches, would trust in me and gives me confidence to see things tactically and analyze on my own. Makes me feel comfortable to go to them and be really confident in what I'm seeing when I watch games.
Yeah, and does that extend to players? Obviously, you mentioned, you like to have a few clips for players to review, when they come back for that first session. So is that, are you looking at an individual player and looking to give them some feedback? Again, is that something that a player might ask for some feedback on, or is it something you've got a bit of a blank canvas to just, if you notice something, you've got free reign to sort of bring it up, or does that go through the coach first?
It's a little bit of both. Normally I'll go through a coach,
Yeah.
and then whether or not that message gets relayed. But if it's something minor and a player might ask me something, I'd feel confident giving them feedback if, there's a small kind of, question or, whatever it might be. But it's a bit of both.
Yeah. And I guess, to any, youngsters out there who are maybe passionate about a career in the game, but, either don't think it will happen as a player or they don't want it to happen as a player, they want it to happen in another sort of space. What's your sort of advice for them in terms of, looking at what the options actually are?
Yeah, like I said before, I didn't really know what roles were available and what it took to work in an elite football club. There's a bunch of different jobs and expertise that make up a football department. I think I named a few before. So, physio, sports science, strength and conditioning. So that's more gym based. There's video analysis. There's coaching. There's assistant coaching. There's sport operations. If you look after everything behind the scenes. Any advice I can give would be just to try and get some experience. A lot of the work that I've done have been different experiences and have helped me to kind of hone in on what parts of working in a football club I enjoy.
Yep.
So definitely, do your research. If you can get into volunteer at clubs, do that, because that's how it gets your foot in the door. You can start networking straight away. So there's plenty of opportunities out there. Obviously not at the minute because of COVID and not many teams are training, but definitely when things are open, be approachable, be on the front foot, ask questions.
Beautiful. All right, George. Well, thank you very much for sparing a bit of your time and having a chat to us, and good luck for the season ahead.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Matt.